Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Nice to see you today. I'm Dustin Cormier, and this is How to Rock Astrology. Today, we are going to be learning about what it's like when your natal Pluto is in the sign of Sagittarius or in the 9th house in your natal horoscope. Welcome. Thank you for joining me today. Essentially, we're going to be reading eventually from Jeffrey Wolf Green's Pluto, The Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. Now, this is a continuation of this series, talking about Jeffrey, essentially reading from this book, to learn a little bit more about Pluto, about how Jeffrey Wolf Green conceptualizes what we're going to be reading about in today's episode. Then check out the earlier episodes in this series to get a bigger sense of the bigger picture here. But anybody can watch this video and still get a good sense of what's going on here. Jeffrey Wolf Green has this great way of breaking down what Pluto is as this transmigrating evolutionary lesson that each person is in a continuing progression through. He's going to talk about how Pluto, being in the 9th, or Sagittarius, has proceeded from Pluto being in the 8th house, or from Scorpio, and what that means in the evolving schema of the soul's lessons that it's going through. And he's going to break them down in his way. And that's what we're going to be getting into today, folks. So I hope you enjoy. For your little bit of reference in myself, I am a Leo rising with Pluto conjunct Sun and Mars in Scorpio. And what I often do, as I said, is I'll do my own little take on each thing, and then I'll kind of read from it. But essentially, you guys get the gist of what's going on with Pluto and Sagittarius. Pluto's obsessive, compulsive, lifelong lessons are amplifying and magnifying the themes related to 9, Sagittarius, and the 9th house. This is going to typically involve the ceiling of one's self-concept, the ceiling of one's expansion, and it involves a resistance, an emotional subjective security resistance on holding on to a limited ceiling of conception until eventually reality forces you to question the emotional security nature of the philosophy, the reality that you are trying to hold on to the conception of. Pluto is going to obsess about one layer of it for whatever reason. Maybe your parents have caused you to have like an emotional reaction in regards to your religion, so that you stick to your religious principles and you don't look outside them. You don't look outside your country's nationality. You don't look outside your race. You think that your race, religion, society, culture, locale are the best. And then you are confronted with the limitations based on why you have an emotional attachment to these things. Pluto is the emotional attachment factor here. Now, how this is going to play out, how each individual is going to assess and react and respond to the confrontation that this incarnation is going to put you through by having Pluto in Sagittarius or having Pluto in the 9th house. It depends in both cases, whether it's in Sagittarius or the 9th house. Jupiter is going to be an important factor here, more so for Pluto and Sagittarius. Because Jupiter is the main karaka, the main significator of the 9th house, as it makes sense because Jupiter rules Sagittarius, which is the 9th sign. So if you have a well-placed Jupiter, if it's close to exaltation, if it's getting aspects from its friends, the Sun, Mars, or the Moon, especially the benefic Moon, then these are the kinds of things. Oh, and also if Jupiter's close to the 1st house, where it gains Digbala in Vedic astrology. These are all things that can give Jupiter the intuitive understanding of the need to progress through the cosmological onion of self-realization, always knowing that we are all As Bob Dylan says, we are all in an eternal state of becoming. And whatever we are at any moment should never be conceived of as any final reality. Because there's always more to integrate, more of ourselves to grow into, more to explore. As this placement will show us whether we like it or not. If you can conceive yourself of being in an eternal state of becoming, then you can always shed the shell of what I am now in order to be receptive to what I could be. And Sagittarius is going to probably fling us through this Plutonian thing. The Sagittarius in the 9th house is going to fling us with a spiritual resolve to seek the final answer to whether we are limiting ourselves in our concept. So, I could go on about it forever, but I think that we ought to just get into it, folks. One of my main points I wanted to stipulate there is that Jupiter is an important planet, and if Jupiter is well placed, it will give us an easier time dealing with the obsessive compulsive resistance that Pluto applies to Sagittarius. Because Jupiter, again, holds Sagittarius and the 9th house in a way. But also consider, if this is in the 9th house, and it's not in the sign of Sagittarius, then we also have to consider what this 9th house is channeling itself through. So let's say if you're a Capricorn rising and you happen to have Taurus, or rather that would be Virgo as your 9th house, and this Pluto is in Virgo in the 9th house for a Taurus rising, you have to consider where Mercury is. What's Mercury's relationship to the first lord, Venus? What's Mercury's health and strength in general? You have to consider the placement and health of the 9th lord in order to define how Pluto and Sagittarius is going to express. Because essentially, Pluto is like a psychedelic. It doesn't inherently make you happy or sad. It amplifies the consciousness that you put it into. Pluto's the same way. For better or worse, Pluto is going to amplify and put extreme obsessive compulsive lifelong karmic retribution energy into the house that it's in. And if that house lord, if that sign lord is well placed, and there's places where it can get a grip on Pluto's agenda here, then it won't waste too much energy. It won't have too much resistance. It will be able to let go of whatever it's holding on to in order to come to a better understanding of the self in relation to that cultural role, whatever it is that the self is seeking to experience through that 9th house. In this case of the Taurus rising with Virgo in the 9th house, Mercury is going to be what we need to channel this self-exploration and religious curiosity through. It's through the communication and language of Mercury. And if Mercury is not well placed, then we're going to have difficulty in communication, difficulty with the fun and play and research and mercurial transmission and sharing of information. And then this channel through which this Pluto is seeking to resolve its karmas doesn't have a proper channel through which to grip. And then this will cause more resistance, less energy to apply the Plutonian instinct in an evolutionarily appropriate way. And then we'll experience the unevolved state of Pluto, which we'll be reading about in Jeffrey Wolf's reading here today. So always consider the strength, health and strength of the Lord of the sign that rules the 9th house. And in this case, for Pluto and Sagittarius in the 9th house, also consider where Jupiter is, because Jupiter will always play a part in the unfolding drama of this particular Pluto placement. Jupiter, so hopefully I said that. Jupiter will play a necessary part in this placement. So without further ado, let's get right to it. This is Pluto in the 9th house, or Sagittarius, as written by Jeffrey Wolf Green. Jeffrey Wolf begins by saying, individuals who have Pluto in the ninth house, or Sagittarius, have had the desire and evolutionary need to understand life and themselves in a cosmological, metaphysical, philosophical, or religious context. In the broadest possible sense, the ninth house and Sagittarius are the archetypes through which humanity has a need to explain its connection to the phenomenological nature of the universe and the world in which we live. Essentially, this understanding of how the phenomenological world operates must involve our connection to it, and it must involve some kind of experience, not just an armchair philosopher's reading of old ancient texts or something like that. This is the type of Pluto that is going to launch you into experiences that necessarily eclipse your previous way of conceiving reality. Now, the 8th house in Scorpio is going to be a necessary precursor to the Pluto in the 9th experience. Ideally, according to this idea, Pluto has already transversed the 8th house of this person's soul, whether it's the 8th house or Scorpio as a sign. The 8th house in Scorpio generated the awareness of larger forces in the universe and the world. Forces that were sensed as originating outside the individual. Consequently, there was a need to form some kind of relationship to these forces in order to become identified and united with them. In effect, the relationship allowed the individual to experience these forces directly, and thus to undergo a metamorphosis of his or her personal limitations. The individual became that to which he or she formed a relationship through the osmosis effect. This is explaining what happened with Pluto in the 8th. What happens with that all-absorbing absorption in the forces and unknown things outside of ourselves, because we sense that we're supposed to do that. This is with Pluto in the 8th. Doesn't exactly know what's the best groups to become involved with, what's the best marriage partner that would reflect on who we are. It just needs to do this absorption thing. That's Pluto in the 8th. Because of that direct need to experience these larger forces, people and cultures have developed rituals, methods, and techniques to harness, possess, control, and know these forces outside of ourselves. So, as a result, the Pluto in the 8th house desire and need has led into an understanding and explanation of occult or hidden knowledge. It has also led into internal psychoanalysis or psychological investigations of the inner dynamics or laws that explain who and what we are and how we work. In the 9th house, or Sagittarius, the desire and need has been and is to explain one's relationship or connection to larger forces. Whereas the Pluto in the 8th house, or Scorpio, sensed this connection. In the 9th house, or Sagittarius, the connection is becoming known, properly conceived, with discernment. As a result, individuals with this placement have needed freedom to pursue whatever experiences are necessary to discover the knowledge that explains those larger forces and our connection to them. I've got like a nose hair bothering me, something that just, ooh, that sucks. It's okay though. As with Pluto in all the natural firehouses, the ninth house placement gives the individual the feeling that they have a special destiny or identity. In the ninth house in Sagittarius, the special identity is directly linked to the individual's relationship to the cosmological, philosophical, metaphysical, or religious principles that explain their interconnection to the universe and the world. These people recognize the phenomenological nature of the universe at large, and in contrast to those with Pluto in the third house or Gemini, these people are not as focused on the immediate physical environment. They understand that, in a phenomenological sense, the world or universe simply exists, that it exists of itself beyond labels or classifications, the Gemini-Mercury thing. Yet, because it exists, ninth house Pluto individuals have desires to understand the fundamental truths that explain the existence of the world and the universe. Truth implies natural laws or principles that govern the totality of life as well as the individual's life. Just give me one moment here, folks. Something's bothering my nose, and that just is great timing, isn't it? So, on this basis, these individuals desire to be free in order to generate whatever experiences are necessary to discover the truth of their existence. They need to understand and explain their relationship to the universe via the principles founded on cosmological, metaphysical, philosophical, or religious terms, i.e., what does it all mean, man? As a result, many of these individuals come into this life as natural loners. Many of these individuals have traveled far and wide throughout many lifetimes in the pursuit of truth and knowledge. Many have incarnated into diverse cultures all over the planet. It is also common for many to leave a culture, society, or nation in which they feel inhibited or stifled in their pursuit of truth and knowledge. Consequently, many ninth house Pluto individuals have and will experience a fundamental alienation from their own culture and society. Alienation occurs because most cultures, societies, or nations are based on a specific religious or philosophical system arrived at by general consensus that serves as the framework for understanding or explaining its relationship to the world and the universe. Because the desire and drive of the ninth house Pluto person is to search for and discover truth in an unrestricted way. Alienation arises from the limitations of society because they are being pulled outside of society's taboo cultural ideologies, but they want to explore the fringes of the established socio-cultural framework of what's acceptable and what's not. These social limitations lead to external and therefore internal confrontations for these individuals. Just hold on one sec here, folks. Thank you for your patience. Now, the confrontations that these people experience reinforce the sense of alienation from the culture or belief system into which they have been born. Given a prior life history of incarnating into diverse cultures, many of these individuals will experience alienation no matter what, because each new culture or society will be different from the one that they have just experienced, probably in the past life. The unconscious memories of the most previous life experience will induce the alienation relative to the new culture. This produces a cultural, emotional, and philosophical shock that threatens the unconscious security needs of the individual. The experience of restriction, alienation, confrontation, and shock reflects the evolutionary impulse to discover the comprehensive truths, principles, or laws that underlie the diverse expressions of phenomenological truth as defined by any culture at any time, the transcendental reality and wisdom of how the self ultimately relates to its world. Because the self in one is the self in all, in every culture and time. Alienation is a necessary experience here because it fosters an elimination of any barriers, be they individual or cultural, that are preventing a direct understanding of the fundamental laws and principles that govern the comprehensive and total truth of existence. Because of this evolutionary impulse, many ninth house Pluto individuals will feel rootless rather than identifying with any specific nation. They will consider themselves citizens of the world, for better or worse. On the other hand, many of these individuals will naturally gravitate to certain philosophical or cultural expressions that reflect their own inner intuitive sense of how life should be explained or understood. For some, this natural gravitation to a specific philosophical or cultural expression of truth is at odds with the society or culture that they were born into in this life. The memories of the past often create a desire or need to rediscover or align themselves with a religious or philosophical tradition from another time and another place. For others, the culture that they are born into will mirror perfectly the philosophical or religious tradition necessary to continue their evolutionary journey and to fulfill their karmic requirements. For these individuals, the experience of alienation will be minimized or eliminated altogether. Usually that's with some kind of harmonious aspect to the things related to the ninth house and to Jupiter. Because ninth house Pluto individuals desire to understand themselves in these ways, there's a concentrated development of their inner intuitive faculty. Because these individuals know that they are connected to larger forces beyond themselves, and because of the desire to discover the natural laws that explain this connection, they have necessarily had to develop an intuitive faculty, a sixth sense. Now, intuition is the inherent ability in each of us to know something without conscious reasoning. This knowing or understanding occurs because without any effort on part of on the part of the egocentric and subjective mind. Sorry, let me rephrase that. Intuition is an inherent knowing without conscious reasoning. This knowing or understanding occurs without any effort on the part of the egocentric and subjective mind. Because these individuals know that they are connected to larger forces in the universe, they have tapped into those forces. By intensely focusing upon those forces, they've become aware of their nature and, therefore, of the laws and principles behind those forces, whatever those forces might be to the individual person. Laws and principles translate into concepts or conceptualization of those forces. Generally, I'd say that wherever Jupiter is for the person is going to show the field through which this understanding comes to be known, what those forces are that this person is trying to get an understanding of. Concepts and conceptualizations and experiences of a certain ceiling of a framework. These concepts and conceptualizations translate into beliefs. A composite of concepts, laws, principles, and beliefs translates into a comprehensive philosophical, metaphysical, cosmological, or religious system. The specific nature of mankind's belief systems are determined by individual and collective evolutionary development and geographic locality. In other words, the fundamental laws and principles are the same for all individuals or cultures, but are conceived, conceptualized, and expressed in a diversity of cultural and individual ways. This becomes clear when we observe the world's amazing array of religious and philosophical systems. Even though the basic laws and principles are the same for all peoples and cultures, the individual and cultural interpretation of those principles and alchemical archetypes reflects not only diversity, but individual and cultural necessity. Individuals with Pluto in the 9th house or in Sagittarius will interpret these intrinsic laws and principles according to their own natural evolutionary condition and karmic necessities. And therein is the struggle that is often born within the minds of these people. The struggle to employ a fluid sense of a rigid formula, a fluid grasp on universal truths, an individuated grasp of universal truths and concepts. The evolutionary need to focus on and develop the intuitive faculty in order to know the truth of reality. This creates many problems for the individual and for society. These problems are rooted in the two coexisting desires within the soul. The desire for separateness results in an egocentric over-identification with a specific philosophical or religious system that reflects the needs of the society or the individual. So, Jeffrey Wolf Green describes at the start of this playlist, if you want to check out the earlier parts of this, just to give you a little review, Jeffrey Wolf Green tells us that each individual has each soul has two coexisting desires. One is to separate from the source in order to experience the source in through the visage of black karma, lead, in order to transmute that lead ultimately back into the gold of self-realization. But there's this two-way realization that needs to occur to understand the individual as separate from the source, but also to understand the individual as the source. And it's the separateness that is the rajasic and tamasic qualities that can cause us struggle. But we need them in order to, that's part of the funky dance that we experience as souls caught in time. Time is the ride. You just got to learn to understand it. But I digress. So these are the two coexisting desires of the soul. The desire for separateness results in an egocentric over-identification with a specific philosophical or religious system that reflects the needs of the society or the individual. So this is one half of it. And this over-identification is based on the need for emotional, physical, spiritual, or intellectual security and stability. This need for security and stability through Pluto, the ego, the deep emotional security reactive impulse center, this security and the need for security and stability gives rise to the need for the society or the individual to defend against the intrusion of other interpretations of the same intrinsic laws and principles by other cultures or other individuals. In this delusory part of self-realization, which is illusion, which is non-knowledge, which is not self-knowing, but just the darkness of ignorance and unevolved intelligence, in this state of delusion and separateness, the individual or culture will either attempt to impose its system upon another, or will withdraw from the threat posed by another individual or culture. The history of human experience on the planet abundantly demonstrates this fact. So this is written in the 80s, and Jeffrey Wolf notes that the recent turmoil in Ireland, the Middle East, South Africa, China's imposition on Tibet, and so forth, are only the latest manifestations of this sad evolutionary development. He goes on to say that the negative manifestation of this evolutionary condition is what Jeffrey Wolf Green calls the Billy Graham archetype. The need to convert others to one's own point of view. In a delusive way, this need is called teaching, but it is really indoctrination, when that which is being taught is presented with the attitude that we are right and they are wrong. I am right and you are wrong. The stated goal of Christianity has been to convert those of other religions to the Christian faith, for example. Thus, we have missionaries who went about in the medieval ages killing native savages of the land in the name of God in order to convert the heathens to the greater religious indoctrination, which is ours, not yours. Of course, many other religions also seek to convert others. Sects within a religious system also occur because an individual or a group of individuals' interpretation of the tenets of the religion in a different way than that prescribed by tradition. Oh yeah, so each religious system has its sects, and these sects occur because certain groups of individuals understand the basic tenets, the universal formulated tenets of that religion in different ways from the orthodox, traditional way. So, individuals with Pluto in the 9th house, or Sagittarius, commonly need to convert others to their points of view because of their own need for emotional security and stability. Again, this security and stability is linked with their particular interpretation of the laws and principles that apply to all. When an individual or a culture exists in a state of separatist delusion, the phenomena of generalizations will occur. In interpreting the laws of the universe, in interpreting the laws and principles of the universe in specific ways, resulting from evolutionary and karmic necessity and geographic locality, which are beyond the person's power to appoint. You can't choose where you're born, what culture you're born into. So by interpreting the laws and principles of the universe in specific ways resulting from your past, from the limited ceiling of your conception, and from your geographic locality, your specific interpretation is projected in a generalized way, that as truths that apply to all. The principles of morality, ethics, and virtues that are reflected in specific interpretations and versions of a particular philosophical or religious system are also projected as generalized truths that apply to all. In this state, the individual or culture will consider others wrong when they do not conform to their specific version of the truth. So the individuated state of this Pluto getting a hold of its place in Sagittarius, or the ninth house. Getting out of the herd unconscious state and coming into an individual realization that my truth is the best one and no one else's is. True teaching, of course, occurs when the individual or culture manifests the attitude that what is being taught is only one expression of the phenomenological truths or principles of the universe, and that these truths or principles should be considered or experienced for oneself through the lens of priority and of importance of reality, appropriate for the individual's evolutionary and karmic lessons. Another problem related to the development of intuition with Pluto and Sagittarius, or the ninth house, is that the individual may not know how to communicate that which way they are intuiting through common, linear, rational language. The development of intuition is a function of the abstract superconscious mind. The ability to ponder, wonder, or speculate upon the nature of existence in a cosmological or phenomenological context, to abstract oneself from one's immediate physical environment, and to ponder one's relationship to the universal. The power of abstraction directly relates to the development of the intuitive faculty. Thus, these individuals simply become aware of principles and information that are not products of their own education, deductive analysis, or mental gymnastics. This is knowledge that simply comes into the mind. Many of these individuals may not understand why they know what they know. They just do. A potential problem occurs when the individual attempts to communicate that which they just know. They just know. I don't know why, I just know. In a way that can be grasped or understood by other people. To find the words that express the intuited knowledge or that which the person already knows from prior life efforts. This is part of the reason for the Pluto and Sagittarius or ninth house person expressing these intrinsic loner qualities. this communication problem can obviously be very frustrating. For example, many ninth house Pluto individuals have had many lives in the East. The language systems of the East have a totally different structure than those of the West. In the West, a word describes a fact, a detail, or a particular object. Oriental languages contain characters that describe whole concepts and symbolic conceptual resonances. So changing one line within the character can alter the nuances of expression of that concept, or even change the concept entirely. Ninth house Pluto individuals naturally think in conceptual wholes based on prior evolutionary intent, assuming that they had past lives in the East. This is a very interesting concept here. To find the specific words to explain an intuitive concept can create many problems, especially during childhood. This can reinforce the natural sense of alienation that was discussed earlier, as well as this feeling that you might be an Eastern developed person in past lives that comes into a Western culture now, which says, stop your mumbling nonsense about this or that, animals and the monsters under the bed, and the ghosts or any concept of consciousness permeating beyond rational abstract reasoning and words and language that we can express. Cut that out, says your Western father. Meanwhile, you've got these internal visions of realities and superconscious, possible interesting things that people never think of, that you can never express, never find words for, never find mythos or mythological archetypes which resonate with these things that you experience as a childhood, in your childhood. So all of this, this can enforce the alienation that was discussed earlier. And it can promote withdrawal from the new life or culture, and a lifelong search for a philosophy that feels natural and comfortable. This might be the sort of thing where, in the same way that, a woman, a girl in her youth never experienced a father, never had a father figure, and so she goes her whole life trying to seek out her father in her lovers, but none of her lovers ever perfectly fit the image that she's expecting in her father that she never had. In the same way, this person with the Pluto in Sagittarius could be hoping from past lives to have the experience of the perfect cultural role that is so vague and nebulous that it never finds, especially because in past lives they've been through so many different cultures, different modalities and concepts and ways of thinking, that you can go to the West and you can go to the East and the North and the South, and nothing will ever feel finally fully fitting. This search may be played out physically by traveling to many states or countries. It can be played out intellectually through reading works of literature or philosophy. Or it can be played out by simply drifting. These drifters never stay long in one place or connect in any committed way with any one person, environment, or philosophical orientation. Another problem inherent in the development of intuition is the potential for experiencing visions of the future. These visions may be of a very personal nature, or they may be of a collective or planetary nature. The problem is twofold. One, the visions may reflect deep unconscious desires that translate into meant-to-be experiences or potential experiences for the individual or others who are in close association with the individual. these visions can be of a positive or negative nature, depending on the complex interactions of many karmic dynamics built up over many lifetimes. Now, we're still talking about the first part of this problem here. Now, the potential problem is that the vision that we have, having this vision of the future, it can merely be a reflection of the individual's own subconscious desires. This dynamic can create the self-fulfilled prophecy, because if the desire is strong enough, it cannot help but transpire, especially if you put that much mental energy into it and you're so fast, like Plutonianly obsessed and fascinated with this possibility that keeps creeping into your head. In this way, the individual denies responsibility for his or her own actions, or the effect of the vision on another's life, because it was meant to be. Oh, you failed going to school. I just have this feeling that my sister's going to fail university, and they just kept putting the consciousness out. And I told you this was going to happen. These kind of things can happen. In other cases, an individual may... We're still talking about the first problem of having visions of the future. So in other cases, an individual may truly have visions that are not based on unconscious desires. These visions simply reflect the individual's highly developed intuition into the nature of things and the future. Again, they may not know why they know or see these things. They just do. Problems occur here because others often do not want to know about the vision or do not understand how the person's vision may concern them. Jesus of Nazareth, according to Jeffrey Wolf Green, had a 9th house Pluto in Virgo. He knew the truth of his visions, yet others were confused or did not want to know about them because of the effect they would have on their own lives. That's cool. Now we're getting into the other part of this twofold problem that personal visions of the future can take on. Number 2 is that the individual can experience collective, not relating to themselves that much, but collective or planetary visions that apply to all of us. Nostradamus, who allegedly, according to Jeffrey Wolf Green, had Pluto in the 9th house and Sagittarius, is a classic example. Sometimes these visions accurately foresee later events, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes people listen, and sometimes they don't. Some understand, and some don't. Individuals with Pluto in the 9th house or in Sagittarius are learning that the future can be altered through individual and collective choices and actions. Consequently, they must accept the possibility that a vision may not come to pass, and they must learn not to become overly attached to or identified with the vision on an egocentric basis. Don't let it obliterate them with the fear that they are obliged to help it become a reality, or they're obliged to tell the message to people. And if they have a vision of the end of the world happening in 2012, whether they're right or not, they better not let it completely alter and mess up their experience of reality on the way to that thing, because lo and behold, 2012 might come along and they were wrong and they just wasted years of their lives on something that was ill-conceived, right? Above all, they should be aware that they did not create a vision of this kind. This kind of vision occurs because of a highly developed intuition that is tapped into universal and cosmic forces. If they have this vision of the future that might not it could be true or it might not, and some people do. I mean, Jeffrey Wolf Green here is expressing his faith that Jesus and Nostradamus did have Pluto in the ninth house or Sagittarius and did effectively use them in the way that we would expect them positively to be used, to actually tap into the superconscious intuition. You could get visions, ecliptic visions of future realities of any parts of your life. And they might be true, some might be true, some might not be true. But you have to deal with the reality of seeing them and still going about the daily business without letting things get intermucked and interlaced. By being unified with these forces, the osmosis effect of Pluto produces the knowledge or vision. These kinds of visions occur of themselves. In general, then, individuals with Pluto in the ninth house or Sagittarius have had the evolutionary desire to expand their horizons of personal awareness. They've needed to identify themselves with abstract principles that allow the development of a cosmological belief system that explains their relationship to the world and universe. Their emotional security is linked to these belief systems. The natural evolutionary condition of an individual and the South Node with its planetary ruler will relate to how this desire and need has been fulfilled in the past, and therefore the vessel, the South Node is the past vessel through which the energy and resources of life can flow through and be retained and sustained in order that, just like how when in the game of territorial war in the medieval era, you wanted to have your castle have its solid foundation. You want to have an economy that is well protected before you can advance farther, to have the resources, the knights that could launch an attack on a neighboring city or citadel or plot of land in which to grow and expand into. In the same way, we need to use K2 in the South Node to access resources in order to dive headfirst into Rahu in the North Node, as well as Pluto and the integration of Pluto's pole, which is the opposite house from Pluto. These are all things that Jeffrey Wolf Green explains earlier on in this book. If this gets confusing, I would refer to the lessons at the start of this series to explain anything that might be confounding to you. But we're going to go through it. Jeffrey Wolf Green is going to give us some case histories to illustrate that the emotional security of the person is linked to the belief systems that they carry on, for better or worse. And they are going to have their emotional security challenged in the face of new burgeoning, eclipsing realities. Now, let's take a look at two case studies that describe this Pluto and Sagittarius ninth house situation. Case 1. Just going to show us a little picture of case 1. Here we can see Pluto. Pluto is retrograde in Leo in the ninth house. And the ninth house also is where it also contains the North Node in Cancer. So the moon is the North Node Lord, and it's in Pisces here. And we can see that the South Node, therefore, is in Capricorn, and the South Node's Lord is Saturn, also in Cancer, but in the uncontrolled, unstable 8th house. Now, case 1. Feel free to pause the video for a moment if you want to just digest the figures going on there. Jeffrey Wolf tells us in case 1, this individual has Pluto in Leo retrograde in the 9th house. The south node is in Capricorn in the 3rd house, and its planetary ruler, Saturn, is in Cancer in the 8th house. This individual is in a spiritual evolutionary condition. Of course, Jeffrey Wolf Green, earlier in this series, we talk about how he describes 3 stages of personal evolution and progression. First is the herd state, where we are unconscious to the Plutonian forces that are pushing us unconsciously into painful experiences. The second evolutionary state is the individuated state, where the ego says, I am a part of this, and I need to use my will to stop this pain from the past. But of course, the individuated will is going to also suffer and spill its cup in many ways, until eventually there's enough knowledge to become an spiritualized conception. Through all that suffering and struggle in samsara, some lucky, people eventually push their way to a spiritualized state of evolutionary understanding of themselves. This happens to be a spiritualized evolutionary, a person in the spiritualized state who allows the sattvic reality that evolution is coming through them, and they are not their ego is not the fulcrum here, but their ego is merely a vessel of sacrifice to the larger forces of Plutonian truth that are trying to pour through them and through everyone. Now, this person is in the spiritualized state. Again, they have Pluto in Leo retrograde in the 9th house. South node is in Capricorn in the 3rd house, and its planetary ruler is in Cancer in the 8th house. This individual is in a spiritual evolutionary condition. He was born in Utah, where the prevailing religious tradition is Mormonism. His parents were devout Mormons. His father was an elder within the Mormon church. As a boy, this individual was immersed in the Mormon point of view. His father was convinced that the doctrine of Mormonism was the only right path for everyone. He was self-righteous and intensely authoritative in his convictions. All opposing points of view were rebuked instantly. The boy followed in the father's footsteps and did not question him. His need to link his sense of personal identity to a religious doctrine was fulfilled through his father. It reflected his own evolutionary and karmic requirements, which is that he did desire to abide by some kind of some long scripturally unfolded and digested religiosity and spiritual metaphysical wisdom. Rather than experiencing alienation, he actually felt right at home in the environment of his parents and culture. But as an adult, he became just as actively involved in the Mormon religion as his father had. And just as his father had defended this religious orientation against any other point of view, so did this individual. The sense of personal identity and emotional security and stability was the basis of this defense and exclusion of other points of view, especially because his father, he wanted to be proud for his father, to do what was right, and his father to push this emotional rigidity, this emotional security basis upon this conception of reality. This man eventually became a minister and relocated to another state where Mormonism is not necessarily widespread. In the process of trying to convert others to Mormonism, he experienced intense philosophical and intellectual confrontations with others who did not share his point of view. At this point, he began to experience a sense of alienation. In addition, the intensity of the different points of view to which he was exposed in the process of trying to convert others led to an inner questioning of his own convictions. A progressive state of dissatisfaction, a sense of dissatisfaction with the limited and exclusionary nature of his doctrines began to occur. Insecurity and instability followed because his increasing awareness and consideration of other points of view challenged the very foundations of his sense of personal identity and this grip that he thought he had on a satisfyingly ethical and true sense of service to something larger than himself, something more transpersonal and transcendentally wise than himself. He thought that he had it by just being secured to this one religious doctrine, but then he's finding as he explores that he's only shooting himself in the foot by sticking to the one. The power of other points of view made him feel progressively more powerless. Confronting and questioning his father and the elders of his religion only intensified his dissatisfaction and alienation, because their answers and reactions were always the same. Now, Jeffrey Wolf really just gives us this kind of a cliffhanger on this poor individual. But we can see that that person, that is the confrontation that this person in the spiritualized state has to experience. Because spirituality, the sattvic reality, is ever in a state of the dissolution of karma, which must necessarily be challenging in some way or another. Wouldn't you agree? So while that person was in the spiritualized state, that doesn't mean that Pluto in Sagittarius is going to be easy for them. They had an open door to experiencing the Pluto in the 9th house. And with that brought the challenges and confrontations which would become the pain and the resolution of the karma of Pluto being attached to conceptions and religiosity and attached to the service to it. Ultimately, the person had to experience this painful confrontation, and that's kind of the end of the case study. That's good enough to explain that story. Now, here we come into case 2, case study number 2. This is an individual with Pluto in the 9th house in Virgo. And that Pluto in the 9th house is actually conjunct the south node in Virgo in the 9th house. My darn computer's not going to sharpen that image. The north node is in Pisces in the 3rd house. Mercury, which is ruling Pluto and the south node, is in Libra in the 11th house. And Neptune, also in Libra, is channeling the north node in Pisces, because Neptune, according to Jeffrey Wolf Green, is the ruler of Pisces. And that north node is here in the 12th house in Libra. Now this is case 2. Pluto is in Virgo in the 9th house, conjunct the south node in Virgo. The planetary ruler, Mercury, is in Libra in the 11th house. This individual is in the preliminary stages of the individuated evolutionary state. So this person has gone through many lifetimes of being in the herd consciousness, where Pluto was just pushing around over top of them, and they're just a chess piece in the collective motions of people around them. They're not in a spiritualized state at all. They moved through that unconscious herd state to the point where the Plutonian tamasic unconscious has forced them to see that they have to awaken. They've got the pressure of evolving human personality and ego to understand that by getting in an engagement with the world around you, you can interact with it and apply yourself evolutionarily to progress and to save energy and to not waste energy in reactive dumbness, because intelligence is genetically useful. And that's why we evolve in the way that we do. So this person has gotten out of the herd unconscious state and is becoming individuated, but now they have to deal with ego. Now they have to see themselves in the context, the spiritual context of evolution. The person is not at that state yet. They're just becoming an individual ego saying, hey, I don't need to get pushed around by this Pluto dynamic anymore. I can be a part of it. And let's see what kind of reaction they have to the Pluto in Sagittarius. This person was born in Sweden, where the prevailing Christian tradition is dominated by the Church of Sweden. In the early part of her life, this person was exposed to the doctrines and teachings of that church. She found that her need to understand herself and reality in cosmological terms was satisfied to some degree, yet, as she became older. So in the early part of her life, she was exposed to the doctrines of the Church of Sweden. Her need to understand herself and reality in cosmological terms was satisfied to some degree by her indoctrination into the Church of Sweden. Yet, as she became older, she felt a progressive alienation and sense of lack in these limited doctrines. Along with a major percentage of her peer group, she began to criticize the limitations of this doctrine and its interpretation by the ministers of the church, likely because the South Node probably for that whole year was progressing over that Pluto in Virgo in the 9th house. Her developing sense of intuition knew that there were different ways of viewing and understanding life in a cosmological and religious context. Speculating upon this issue intensified her sense of alienation. The church did not have the answers for her or her peer group. So, finally rejecting the church outright, she aligned herself with others who felt similarly alienated. You can see the problem with this sort of reaction is that there's a negative trauma associated with the doctrination that happened at first, and that some of that doctrination might have been good. But this person has a reactive emotional instinct to say, that gross, bad church, that bland, sanitized church reality is so bland and so annoying. And so now they're reacting against that. But the problem is that there might have actually been some positive wisdom in that Church of Sweden, which they are now rejecting wholesale, right? Together with this group of people, she adopted a lifestyle in which the philosophy, morals, and ethics were based on an agnostic orientation to the world. By adopting this point of view, she neither denied nor admitted the existence of God or the rightness or wrongness of the doctrines that followed from that point of view. In that way, she did not try to convert others to her point of view, other than to challenge those who did not question the certainty of their own convictions and beliefs. How do you know? She would ask. So it's not that she's trying to push her beliefs on others. She's trying to acidly, plutonianly dissolve any sort of framework or conceptual structure for any conception of reality outside of one's palpably third house type of explanations. It's this like, how do you know for sure? Can you prove it to me in a third house Gemini way? So, by adopting an agnostic, philosophical, and cosmological orientation, she created maximum freedom to experience and explore whatever she needed in order to answer her own questions, which is good and bad. Although she was a loner at heart, she needed to belong to a peer group who shared the same philosophical orientations. And she did this in order to not feel alone. In so doing, she was not alone. She did not feel alone, nor did she appear to be a loner on the surface in her group. By exposing herself to a peer group in this way, she was subjected to different opinions and values. Experiencing lack and confusion in herself and needing to belong to something, she tried out many different ideas, beliefs, values, and lifestyles. Each one worked for a time, yet each ended up lacking the sense of cosmic meaning that she was fundamentally seeking. Some kind of basic sense of unity within all the many forms. As she got older, the sense of alienation deepened. She felt more lonely, and she criticized herself for going along with the crowd. She did not know what to do or where she fit in with respect to the cosmic scheme of things. However, she remained steadfastly an agnostic who challenged others who were not. It's like this wanting to be unified with some principle, to absolve herself of this cosmic loneliness of having no place to stand. She wanted no one to have any place of stand, and she would acidly dissolve and challenge anyone who thought that they had some, at least remotely solid, concept of singularity of knowledge. Say that there's always a possibility for more. And by doing so, she always eluded and evaded the sense that there might be at least some semblance of a system, of a person, or a role, or of a place in life that works good enough to sacrifice herself for, to help be connected in a joyous way to the dissolution of karma, which is the real meaning of it all. So, the polarity, Jeffrey Wolf tells us at this point that the polarity point of Pluto in the ninth is the third house, or Gemini. The evolutionary intent for this life is one wherein these individuals must learn that their version of reality, their beliefs, principles, laws, ethics, and morality are relative. They are learning that the paths to truth are many, and that each person has their own path and way of discovering the truth for themselves. And this is relevant for you as well as those through which you deal. This lesson occurs through necessary philosophical or intellectual confrontations with other people, or through cultural alienation. By experiencing diversity or differences in this way, the fundamental security of these individuals will be challenged. Their security is linked with the conceptual framework or beliefs with which they have identified themselves, be it atheism, existentialism, any religion, agnosticism, and so forth. Having their security challenged or confronted in this way, these individuals can be very resistant to other points of view. Thus, they can be very argumentative, as they attempt to convert others to their point of view by exposing the weaknesses in another's argument or convictions. And yet, they are destined to draw to themselves other people who are as powerful or more powerful than themselves. These others will have different points of view or beliefs that show the weakness or limitations in the individual's own system of beliefs or conceptual organization, or more importantly, their emotional attachment to their system of beliefs or conceptual organization. These confrontations can also occur through others who simply do not grasp what the individual is trying to communicate. This kind of confrontation occurs in order to teach the individual how to communicate in a language that is understandable to others. In order to do so, these individuals must study the diversity of life with respect to all the levels on which it exists. In studying life in this way, the individual is forced to realize the relativity of existence, of experience, of paths, and of truths. In this way, the individual can learn how to communicate in a logical and succinct way in order to share with and relate to others within the context of their reality. By so doing, they can allow themselves to be educated by others, and others can be educated by them. It's concepts sharing with concepts in order to get the bigger picture. It's the classic thing, maybe he even says it in here, is of the five blind, a blind man and a deaf man and a tactily mute man are all in a man with no taste and a man with no smell are all trying to perceive what an elephant is. And the blind man says, the blind man can feel everything, and they all try to communicate with each other, but all together they have something wrong with the picture of reality. So in the same way, people with different conceptions of reality and truth all need to work together, even through the pain of realizing what they lack in their conception, in order to give way to the greater conception of things. Through both of these evolutionary routes in these confrontations, the ninth house Pluto individual will progressively learn to understand the essential unity of all paths, of all truths. They will learn how to take many diverse facts or pieces of information, and through their inherent ability to intuitively synthesize, they'll arrive at ever greater understanding of the total nature of personal, collective, and universal truths. They will thus progressively become less defensive and develop an attitude of appreciation and understanding of the relativity of truth as expressed through individuals and cultures. There will be no need to convert anybody. In its place will be an attitude of mutual understanding, sharing, and of suggestion rather than conversion, of teaching, true teaching, rather than indoctrination. Many ninth house Pluto individuals bring a natural wisdom into this life based on prior life efforts. Many are natural teachers as a result. Yet, until they learn third house or Gemini evolutionary lessons, they will be karmically blocked from being able to express or meaningfully relate their knowledge to other individuals or to society. Some will interpret this block as a sign to dissociate themselves from the mainstream or of cultural life. They will rationalize this sign, this omen, into an abundance of philosophical justifications to explain their non-involvement with the world, escapism from the world in which they're born into. Others who refuse to understand the real meaning of this karmic omen, the sign, not understanding that they need to understand in a language to interpret their inner visions and futuristic visions and what have you. Others who refuse to understand the meaning of this sign that they are not getting will similarly use philosophical justifications to explain these kinds of actions. These types become the alienated drifters who forever roam the highways and alleyways searching for something that is never found. Others take refuge in their cherished belief systems and remain isolated from those who do not believe as they do, relating only to those who share their principles. They hang out together in a state of philosophical and cosmological smugness, looking down upon others who do not share their point of view. Those with Pluto in the 9th house who understand the real significance and meaning of the sign of needing to integrate Mercury. That's essentially the sign we're talking about. Mercury, Gemini, 3rd house, individual realities, individual applications of the universal. Those who understand the real significance of this, they resolve to understand the evolutionary lessons at hand. According to their evolutionary capacity, they can transform our vision as to the nature of reality in ways that are as diverse as life itself. This is the positive expression of Pluto in Sagittarius, is having many ways of relating to many different cultures, people, and levels of understanding and evolution. Many different ways of expressing and relating the one universal truth of self and dharma and relation to the world and relationship to metaphysical natural laws. Now, in our first case, the case 1, the Mormon minister's north node was in Cancer in the 9th house, and its planetary ruler, the moon, was in Pisces in the 5th house. This man finally, inevitably, developed an awareness that all the paths to God were legitimate. This is the man who was in the spiritualized state, remember. He made a complete break from Mormonism and his father because they could not accept his new attitude. He became a minister in the Unity Church, through which he not only spread this kind of teaching, but he also promoted the expansion of his own self-realization. His oratory, his speaking, inspired others because he was a living embodiment of what he was teaching. Now, the Swedish woman's north node was in Pisces in the 3rd house, and its planetary ruler, being Neptune, was in Libra in the 12th house, isolating escapism. She ended up moving to a Sioux reservation in the United States. She became a nurse practitioner, helping the Native Americans through her work and adopting their values, beliefs, and lifestyle. She discovered the sense of cosmic meaning that she was seeking, and she found her place within the cosmic scheme of things. She also acted as an individual who bridged the cultural gap between the Sioux, the local Sioux Native Americans, and the government. By committing herself to the Sioux cosmological orientation, she was able to experience the living divinity through the techniques and methods that she was taught. This is, of course, the woman who was born into the Swedish church and abandoned all dogma, tried to get away from all senses of this or that philosophical orientation. She, by applying her practical, agnostic, humanitarian sense of things, applied herself to a certain culture, the Sioux, and especially being fueled in some way, probably egotistically, by the rebellion of these people against the orthodoxy of the government of America. This is probably what was going on here. But through all this, she committed herself to the Sioux cosmological orientation, and she was able to experience the living divinity through the techniques and methods that she was taught there. And as a result, she was no longer an agnostic. It's interesting that she can be opened up after all of this to some sense of a living reality of cosmological awareness burgeoning through her. So that was it, folks. I know it's been a long one. This, I can see I'm already at an hour and a half, so I hope you guys have been enjoying this. Before we finish, we're going to read some common characteristics of individuals with Pluto in the 9th house or Sagittarius. And then we're going to look at a few, I'm going to show you a picture of a few sample charts with Pluto in the 9th or in Sagittarius, as given by Jeffrey Wolf Green. And then that will be the end of the video. Some common characteristics of individuals with Pluto in the 9th house or Sagittarius include a deep feeling of alienation, extremely intuitive. These are conceptual thinkers. They can be very fixed in their beliefs. They have a need to convert others to their point of view. They value honesty. They can be natural loners. They're philosophical. They have an ability to laugh at themselves. They can make others laugh at themselves also. They're natural storytellers with a tendency to exaggerate. They're concerned with truth, not opinions. And they tend to be natural people of the forest, of the earth, of human flesh, rather than being cosmopolitan and sophisticated. Some famous people with Pluto in the 9th house or Sagittarius include Khalil Gibran, Michel de Nostradamus or Nostradamus, Michelangelo, interestingly, John F. Kennedy, and Jesus of Nazareth, according to Jeffrey Wolf Green and his noted sources. So I'm just going to show a quick example of all of these charts. Here's Khalil Gibran. Feel free to pause to check any of these individual charts out. This is Nostradamus' chart, according to Jeffrey Wolf Green. This is Michelangelo's chart, according to Jeff Wolf Green. This is John F. Kennedy's chart. And this is the chart of Jesus of Nazareth, according to Jeff Wolfgreen. Come on. I'm trying to get it to sharpen. Sometimes my computer just won't let me do it. In any case, you guys can see what's going on there. Feel free to pause it, check out any one of those charts to digest the themes as related to how Jeffrey Wolfgreen has described them. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you guys enjoyed that. That was our reading today from Pluto, the Evolutionary Journey of the Soul. It was a long one, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope it wasn't too long for you. Let me know in the comments if you thought that was the case, but inevitably I think that I do enjoy, as much as I know not everybody goes for these long videos, but some people like me, you know, feel you can, if you're getting onto how I do these videos, you might want to download this YouTube video as an MP3, put it on an iPod player, go walk around and do some mushrooms, or, you know, take some acid in a forest and digest slowly in the peace of your own fun exploration whatever it is that's on these videos. That's what I often do when I get a big, long video like this. So I'll go for a walk, see the world, see outside. Especially might be useful for you as Pluto and Sagittarius, or the 9th house. But I digress. Let me know what you guys thought, folks. Send me a like if you liked it. And if you really enjoy how I do these videos, feel free to subscribe as well, because I've got a few more Pluto things coming out. Pluto in relation to the planets. I got lots of stuff talking about how we can integrate Vedic astrology with Western astrology, which, again, you as a Pluto 9th house person might also find interesting. So anyway, thanks for watching, folks. I hope this is enriching for you. Keep your eyes on the skies as we continue our journey of unfolding the eternal knowledge of self through astrology and the esoteric knowledge of the universe. Thanks for watching, folks. Take care.